Hello and welcome to Faith Talks. In today's program, we'll be asking, is Christianity a straitjacket? Joining me in the discussion and ready to share their views and opinions are Patrick Johnson and Paul King Brown. Now, why is it that when we talk about Christianity, so many people feel it's all about rules and regulations? Is Christianity just a limiting way of life? Patrick?
Yes, I guess the whole straitjacket image is what most people would associate with Christianity. We think of those films where someone who has become mentally imbalanced and needs to be kept in check is put in something where they can't move. And that's the way many people have experienced Christianity. I guess that's really based on the premise that having rules and boundaries and regulations will limit your freedom. And I'm not so sure that that is actually the case. We do need boundaries, actually. I think everybody needs boundaries. And because you set boundaries does not necessarily mean that your freedom is limited. Actually, I think it can be the opposite. Mm-hmm. Boundaries can actually liberate more than restrict. All right, interesting. Paul, what do you think about this?
I really agree with Patrick, but I just think that maybe the question is asked because it's predominantly, I remember my own experience, is how religion or Christianity is introduced. And maybe that's why the straitjacket image is basically put on Christianity, because people, it's what you don't do, it's what you, and it seems to be a long list of don'ts. And especially, and most people, you know, Psychology 101 is that we want to enjoy life, we want to be expression, and Christianity doesn't seem to be that. Actually, Christianity, the way it's sold and packaged sometimes, it seems as though it's to be restrictive. And maybe, in a sense, it does seem very much like a straitjacket.
But isn't Christianity and any belief system very restrictive? Because it is somebody else determining the rules around your life, and we want to create and find meaning in our lives from our own experience today. So how can that sit with Christianity?
I think that I'm a parent, and I think one of the most difficult things as a parent was very much just telling my daughter what to do, and me trying to explain to her that I was doing it because I thought it was best for her, and she looking at me like I was some sort of tyrant. And then it's only later on that she suddenly realised that I had her best interests at heart. And so I think that there are always rules. I was listening to a Radio 4 programme about spirituality, and the professor was saying that once he taught spirituality, that everybody needed a form. That at the beginning there was no form, there was no institution, there was no religion. But once you come deeper in spirituality, you do look for form, you do look for structure. And I think that there is a structure there to be had, but it doesn't have to be a restrictive one.
You know, we're both parents, and you talk about how it went with your daughter, and I think about my three as well. When they're little, you have to just tell them what to do and what not to do, because they don't reason well enough. You have to set the boundaries, and that's okay. As they grow, though, mm-hmm. and they become more mature, then they understand the reasons why, and then you don't just talk about do and do not do. Hopefully they get principles by which they then live. So, you know, we talk about what's the first thing you learn about in Christianity, how is it packaged, etc. It's no surprise in a sense that perhaps for some people the first thing is, well, you got to stop doing that, or you got to do that. It's not necessarily negative, all of it.
I think that when you look at the Bible, I mean, the Bible has a perfect example of this metaphor of straitjacket with the story of the prodigal son in Luke 15. And it would seem as though he thinks that everything is a straitjacket, everything's very restrictive, and he almost goes away, and it's in him going away that he suddenly realised that the freedoms that he has and the riches that he has and in going away from it, that the experience of coming back home becomes amazing. He wants to go back to the place where he once saw was restrictive, was a straitjacket. And I think that a lot of people, if we just allow people the maturity, as Patrick was saying, that there is a maturity at the beginning, you see it as the rules, but later on within the maturity, you do see this Christianity as a massive expression of freedom.
I agree with you.
But isn't freedom when I'm allowed to choose and just to develop my own sense of meaning and just to believe anything I want? Isn't it about personal freedom and the ability to make personal choices that is freedom? How can that go together with Christianity?
You know, I think it's a myth that people have that I can be completely free. Most people aspire to that, but it's something you can never have. Because if you're going to live in community, you will have to limit your freedom to be able to relate to somebody else. But we all seem to want to make our own rules and live how we want to and do whatever we feel like. But you can't do that unless you're going to live on an island on your own. Because you have to limit your freedom in order to relate to other people. They may not like the things you like. So what do you do then if you're going to live together? This drive to define everything for myself is actually a fallacy.
And also we're finding within our society that as much as we talk about human rights and our rights and freedoms, that we actually crave community. There's actually, but within a community, as Patrick was saying, there needs to be consideration of each other. The Eastern cultures, even if you look at Islam, where the first thing that they consider is the community, is how does this affect my community? But to consider your community doesn't mean that you don't have freedom and your rights are not considered. It's just it's within a boundary, and freedom does exist within boundaries.
You're talking about freedom within boundaries, and yet, you know, you also talk about that child that has no freedom, that you kind of have to limit, and you need to say these are the rules and these are not the rules. And we're talking about the maturity that grows out. And I can kind of buy into that you need rules at the start of your life, at the start of your journey. But when you become into a maturity, surely you don't need the same rules and regulations. You know, we're talking about either ors and black and whites, and Christianity seems to be very either or, never both and. And so, you know, are we supposed to live in these extremes as black or white, or what about those gray areas in the middle? You know, why is it always defined by the extremes, the rules that we put up in our society?
I think that we need to know what's going. As human beings, I'm happier when I know what's going on. I was driving in London and I was driving with a friend, and we were just saying that, you know, it's not about good or bad driving. It's just knowing what the driver's doing. It's knowing what the other driver's doing. So rules are not in themselves bad. It's literally knowing what each other's doing. And I just feel as though that Christianity has an incredible amount of freedom. And every time we hear the word rules, it doesn't hold, you know, it's almost we need to find another word for rules, another word for laws, another word for statutes, because it seems as though in the Bible it seems to talk about that these freedoms that we want, because I want my daughter to have this incredible, I want her to have a free life. I don't want to contain her. I want to be fully expressive of happiness of everything. And then God says, well, actually, as my metaphor as Father, I want even more for you, but there is these rules, there is these confines, but the confines are in our language. These confines and these laws are negative, when I think that within a biblical context, they're actually very positive, and they still can be.
There are a lot of grey areas. The way I read the Bible, or the way I see what's going on there, Jesus himself, when he came, he tried to give principles. For example, you have what's called the 10 Commandments in the Bible, in the Old Testament, and you know they're enumerated 1 to 10. And you can't take them very literally and just say, well, this is what I'm supposed to do and not do. Jesus was approached one day, apparently by a young man who said, what should I do in order to have the perfect life, to live eternally? And Jesus says, well, keep the commandments. And he could list them and say, I've been doing them. And then Jesus realized, okay, there's more, isn't there? Then he told him, this was a rich young man, he told him, well, okay, go and sell all that you've got, give it to the poor, and then come and follow me. There he was really getting at the center of the principle behind everything. And there, the young man, his choice wasn't, okay, it's easy to keep those black and white things, but when you're getting into principles that are behind it all, that may be a little bit tougher. And I think Jesus wants that. He wants us to get to those principles, that the spirit behind the actual letter of the law, if you want to call it that. But it's a difficult place to be at for many people, I think.
But if I believe as a Christian that God has created me, am I then not free just to figure out how I want to live that life, the Christian life, to define Christianity and faith as I want to? Because we're talking about rules and regulation and life rules, and defining us and keeping us in. But surely my mind and my soul can actually stretch beyond that.
Well, that would make you God over yourself, wouldn't it? If you can make all the rules yourself. And I think what God has been trying to tell us as human beings is, I know a little bit more than you do. And I've told you in general what is best for you. That's what we believe the Bible does, right? It sets out all these principles. So it's best to follow those. Like the car manufacturer kind of knows how best to use the thing. And I think that's what God has done. We may feel like we know it all and we could do it better than He does. I think most of what history tells us is we've really messed up on that. So it's not so easy for us just to make those rules ourselves. It really is a matter of discovering, I think, discovering what rules there are there, or what boundaries, what truths, if you want to call it that God's put in us.
Going back to the parent conversations that we were having before, I've now found that I speak to my mother a lot more, whereas as a child I wouldn't have. It's all maturity. As a child I saw her as restrictive and as strict, and what does she know, and she's restricting my freedoms. Now sometimes I won't even make decisions without her. There's a level of maturity that you grow to. My daughter, where once upon a time she wouldn't have spoke to me about things, now she won't. She's getting to a stage where, what do you think? And it's a level of maturity. She now has seen the picture of the father has somewhat changed in terms of, she doesn't see me as the oppressive one, and maybe I needed to be oppressive at the beginning, or the picture, and I didn't have to fight that. But now she sees, oh right, okay, because now she's thinking, she's getting in a age where she might have her own family, etc. And then invariably she'll do the same thing. So I think maybe I've oversimplified it in a sense with the parent metaphor, but I think very much there is a level of maturity, a level of growing. It isn't a one snapshot of this. I think that there are times when Christianity undoubtedly is like a straitjacket, but I think that as we mature in it, it seems as though Jesus is saying in John, he says, I just want you to have an abundant life, I just want you to be free, I just want you to be expressive, and you can do this around me. So
I think it's time that we just have a little bit of a snapshot and see what some of the younger people that we went and asked, is Christianity a straitjacket?
I think it can be. In some cases it's not, but in some cases we've kind of domesticated Christianity or our religious experience, and that in some way limits us to a certain extent.
Well, it depends how you take Christianity, I guess. For some people it is, but if you're going after Jesus, it shouldn't be.
No, I don't think it naturally is. It isn't implicitly a straitjacket. It just can be projected as such.
I think that most people focus on the emphasis of the do's and don'ts, and so yes, it can give the impression sometimes that Christianity is a straitjacket rather than something to be seen as liberation or freedom.
The restriction on thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, I think it's not putting you into something very restricting, but it's just protecting you and those others around you. And it also comes back to loving one another.
No, I think it's the opposite. I think that it can give you freedom, but I guess looking on the outside in, it probably does look a bit like a straitjacket.
We just saw here a bunch of young people and young adults who have chosen to stay in church or become Christians, have chosen to actually experience some faith-related belief system. And yet some of them also expressed that they felt that Christianity could be a straitjacket. And isn't it just natural that if we actually have a belief in an absolute truth, that actually takes away our freedom? That belief is the enemy of freedom.
Yeah, I think that really is the crux of the whole matter, in a sense, with this whole question. Does objective truth negate freedom altogether? And I would say it doesn't. I don't think you can avoid having some form of believing that there is some form of truth. Everybody does. And so I would say that we need to then consider, all right, are there different truths for everybody, or is there some objective, this is the truth? One way you could think about it is there anybody in the world that's doing something that you believe is wrong? And everybody would say, yeah, of course. But why? That means that you believe there is some objective form of this is right and this is wrong. So everybody believes in that. We may not have defined it, but we all believe in that. And I think that is really what Christianity is trying to tell us, that God has defined that for us.
Yes, but what is truth for me might not be truth for you. And then if I'm imposing my truth on you, Paul, will I then not make that a straitjacket for you?
Yes, I mean, that is, I think that is probably one of the issue. The issue is that we want freedom for ourselves. If I'm selfishly, I want freedom for myself, and I want to express this freedom. But at the same time, I do have rules and regulations for everyone else, and then it goes around like this. So I don't really, for me personally, I don't really believe in the total everything is free concept. I think very much that there are we have social skills, for instance. There are, we sit around a table and there's things that happen. We do need, and it's necessary. Do I need to coexist? I don't know which are rules. I do need to have some type of structure, boundary, rules to able to coexist, and also just so the things are okay between us. What then happens if there is nothing? There is just utter and total and utter chaos, and eventually we're craving for these things. I know that we keep talking about the parenting thing, but I think very much so that eventually that we cry out that our society, we have a society now that's talking about, everything is about law and order. Every time is law and order, because it seems as though when we have law and order, then our freedoms can be expressed. So I think they coexist.
Do you have people who will actually feel or express themselves as anarchists, that no rules should be around, we should all be free to just live as we want? Are you saying that that's not possible?
Yeah, because I'm sure they have set rules within their system. That this is the thing. I can't just go up to them and do whatever I want. Can I just go up to them and punch them in the face? No, because there are rules against that, right? For them, that's wrong. And who says so? So this idea that I cannot, or that I can just define what I want for my own self, can only exist if you live on an island on your own. Once we have community, there has to be rules and regulations for how it works.
So are you saying that freedom doesn't exist unless it is actually tied up within a community or within a set of belief?
Yeah, I think there has to be, in order to define community, you have to have rules and regulations. If you don't have those, you have no community. Yes. How can you say that you are part of a football club, if you don't abide by the rules of what that football club has set up? If there are no rules for the football club, or even for the game, then you don't really have a proper game, do you? So rules and regulations help to define community.
I think that that we keep talking about freedoms, and it's a very sort of a modern phenomena. But even what is even more modern is this whole craving for community. It's we have a government that came in that was talking about the big society, that was sort of recognising that we've had freedom, we've had businesses, we've had banks, we've been able to do whatever we want, and look where this freedom has got us now. And looking at the we can still have freedoms, but it's actually in community that that freedom works best for us. And so I am a pastor of a church that spends a lot of time talking about community, talking about the fact that we matter. There's in the Bible, it seems as though we're talking about this straitjacket theory, that there are people in the Bible in Matthew 25 who think, okay, if I keep the rules and regulations, but then the Bible says that Jesus says, where were you when I was naked? Where were you when I was in prison? Where were you when I was a stranger? Where were you on a street? Where were you when nobody cared about me? And it seems as though that caring for each other is far more important, is far more important than just my freedom, just what I want to do.
So you're actually suggesting that community trumps freedom?
I think they very not just trump it. I think that it excels our freedom. I think that our freedoms are more, you know, we feel better about ourselves in that we care more about our society rather than we care about ourselves. I think there's a frustration within our society, even within ourselves, when it is just about ourselves. And I think that when we move this freedom out to other people, then we just see it rebound back to us.
And I think that really is at the crux of Christianity, defining who we are. We are created to be social beings. We are created to love. I know that sounds very trite, but that really is the bottom line, really. And we discover ourselves best in community when we are learning to care about other people. No doubt about it. And that's exactly what you're getting at.
But then the straitjacket becomes, the image of a straitjacket takes a little bit of a twist, because instead of it being around me, is it not around a community?
Yeah, you know, I think the crux of this whole matter is the idea that freedom is defined by what you don't do. So, you know, freedom is not being told I can't do something. That's not what freedom is, actually. Freedom is if you learn to live within the natural environment that you're in, and abide by the rules that are there, that becomes freedom. So a fish, for example, is free when it's in water. If it comes out of water, it's not free anymore, it'll die, yeah? So in that natural environment, it needs to learn, okay, this is the environment I function best in, so I'm limited, but it's got total freedom if it learns to live well in that. And I think that's what we've got to discover as human beings.
Absolutely, and I think that also there's just, someone was telling me that there was a program on TV, and some people from America, so Irish people, were looking at our society, and they were just saying how disconnected we were, how there's 15 million people in London, for instance, and just how isolated we are. I was on a train and I just watched, and I was one of those people as well. I hadn't commuted for a while, but everybody was either on an iPad, on an iPhone, on something that just enabled them to just to be on their own. Yet loneliness, statistics for loneliness, it's incredible. I think something like 5 million people are considered lonely in London, and that we now have our freedom. We've got our freedom. We've actually got our freedom. But what we're not doing is we're not able to connect. And Christianity offers this connect. I think that we started off with the straitjacket, but I think that we shouldn't be confined just by this question. I think that I think it's a jacket that fits very, very well. I think it's a jacket that allows that we can feel snug around and feel warm and feel comforted, and also it's a jacket that we can take off and give to someone else, and someone can gladly wear it. I don't think that the metaphor of straitjacket, we started off there, but I don't think it totally encapsulates what Christianity really means.
But I want to come back to you, Patrick, because you talked about freedom in the community and about the fish and water. But does that mean that we are then restricted to remain in our own communities? What if are we not? Is it not possible for anyone to break out of their community, or are we kind of like predestined to stay where we are and just remain within that small knit community? Why then is this urge for so many people to move abroad, to go somewhere else, to explore different ways of life?
Yeah, I'm not just talking about your immediate environment. If we use that fish in water thing, that means that you are human on the planet Earth, in community, whether it's in England or some other place. So I see that as the wide platform, if you like. And freedom is all about discovering all that I can do within the environment that I'm made for. And that could be here in England, it could be another country, that's fair enough. I'm not trying to say that you have to set up small communities in one place, but real freedom is discovering who I really am as a human being, and that is done best in community with other people.
But then again, you know, why is it that so many people talk about Christianity is about being forced into one mold, one type of person, and that's hence the whole image of the straitjacket coming in. Why are people left with that feeling? Why is that the perception that we meet?
I think there are two reasons for that, at least. One is there is this misunderstanding of what freedom is. So we're trying to get something that really doesn't exist, where I can make all the rules for myself and think that I can live in community with others only thinking of myself. But then we have to take some responsibility as Christians too. We have, absolutely, as was said at the beginning, we have given the message of Christianity as very limiting. We have talked about it negatively. We have, always talked about what you cannot do, etc., etc., rather than what you can become and how you can discover who you are.
I was at a party with some friends. It was midnight or something, and I was sitting there. I was very tired, and a few people came to speak to me. This girl came to speak to me, and she said that she joined a religion. And she said she didn't have any interest in religion, and but she joined this religion. And I was really interested in why she joined this religion. And the reason she joined the religion was that she was sitting in her house with her child, and she had no food. And someone knocked on the door, and she started speaking to them. And an hour later, the lady came with some shopping. And then a week later, the lady came with something else, and a week later she came with something else, and a week later she came with something else. And she said, and I said, so you joined the church just because she fed you? She said, yeah, I joined the church because this person was nice to me. Mm. And I just think that, that's what people crave. And maybe the reason we're talking about the straitjacket is because Christianity has come with rules and regulations first, and maybe it hasn't come from what you were saying earlier. Just be nice to people. The story that Patrick was talking about the rich young ruler that came to Jesus, the first thing he wanted to show his worth by by the rules and regulations. And Jesus was saying, it's the spirit of the law. What's your heart like? What is your, what are you giving to your community? What are you giving to the people around you? What are you giving to your neighbours? And if that was the way Christianity was actually brought to people, then the question of a straitjacket would never be in the question.
Well, I want to say thank you to both of you for joining me here in the studio and talking about if Christianity is a straitjacket. Freedom, as we've learned, is not the absence of restraints and limitation, but rather it's a matter of finding the restrictions or limitation that is most liberating to who we really are. Why not join in the debate by joining us on Facebook at Faith Talks. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you again next time.